The National Wage Bill Conference embodies the spirit of collaboration and a whole-of-government approach to matters of national importance. It is in this spirit that resolutions from the past conferences have immensely contributed to the positive trend in the wage bill to revenue ratio, which has come down from 51.4% in the financial year 2017-18 to 47.6% in the financial year 2021-22, and further projected to 46.64% in the financial year 2022-23. However, a lot more needs to be done. Your Excellency, we specifically thank you for the summit resolution under your leadership that resolved SRC, IGRTC, and COG to convene this conference. The conveners, in the spirit of a whole-of-government approach, co-opted the Public Service Commission, the Ministry of Public Service and Performance and Delivery, and the State Corporations Advisory Committee to constitute a steering committee that has convened this conference. After 3 days of intense consultations, all delegates have resolved to take actions now towards 35%. This is a journey towards realizing a wage bill to revenue ratio of 35% by 2028. As we are all aware, the Public Finance Management Act and Regulation of 2015 set a clear threshold of wage bill to revenue ratio for the two tiers of government at no more than 35%. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this conference has brought together the national and county governments, private sector, non-governmental organizations, civil society, faith-based organizations, experts in productivity, and academia. The Conference Steering Committee is pleased to report that the presentations, engagements at the plenary, and several caucus sessions have been enriching and inspiring. The delegates have benefited from presentations, discussions, and sharing experiences. Consequently, everyone is well aligned with the vision to realize the towards 35% aspiration target. In addition to the deliberations during the conference, I'm pleased to let you know that under the leadership of the steering committee, a technical team comprising of staff from COG, PSC, the Ministry of Public Service, the SCAC, Ministry of Labor, IGRTC, and SRC, Auditor General, and Controller of Budget, developed technical papers that will be shared with all the delegates after this conference. These papers provide further insights into the presentations that are a synopsis of the technical papers. The 2.5 days have created a shared understanding of the public wage bill in Kenya, its profound impact on our national, county, and institutional financial resources, service delivery to Wanjiku, and economic development of our country. Through shared understanding, the delegates converged on resolutions that shall be presented here today. Resolutions that shall propel Kenya to inch closer to the 35% wage bill to revenue ratio. We owe it to wananchi to collectively achieve this target. Your Excellency, we are extremely grateful for your leadership in this wage bill discourse. The next generation is watching our footsteps. We then can agree here and resolve not to bequeath to them an unsustainable wage bill, but rather a wage bill that is affordable and fiscally sustainable. A wage bill that will not crowd out resources for development and service delivery, and which then propels this country to the next level of economic empowerment of its people. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my welcome remarks, the journey towards 35% public wage bill to revenue ratio is possible by 2028. It is within sight We need not, therefore, defer to the next generation what this generation must do, and we must do by 2028. It is only right that we fold our sleeves and make it happen for this generation. With your leadership, Your Excellency, we are all aligned, and through collaboration and a whole-of-government approach, we shall succeed. God bless you. God bless Kenya. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mengich. At this point, Your Excellency would like to now proceed to a panel discussion, and allow me to invite Commissioner Wangui Mushiri to take her seat, and she's going to introduce the panel that is going to be having this discussion. Your Excellency, the objective of the panel discussion, it's a roundtable discussion bringing home the current status of the role of leadership and the way forward on matters wage, bill, and revenue. Commissioner Wangui Mushiri, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Gitonga. Thank you, Your Excellency. Allow me to stand on the protocols already established as I invite the panel to this discussion. Our first participant will be none other than the SRC chairperson, Madam Lynn Mengich. If you could please make your way down, and a round of applause as she does. She's worked very hard hosting this panel. Our next panel discussant will be the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, the Honorable Moses Kuria. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing us with your presence. We will also have the Council of Governors Chairperson, Her Excellency, Madam Anne Waigoro. Please, let's give her a hearty hand of applause as she makes her way down. And last but not least, our keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Retired Chief Justice, Mr. Maraga. Please, if you could take your seat, please. Thank you, sir. And as we do, if we could kindly be upstanding for the really key chief guest today as he takes his seat. Let us welcome him kindly with a hearty hand. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. We may now take our seats. To begin this panel discussion, we shall begin with you, Chairperson of the SRC. Thank you for taking us through a quick summary of the intense discussions on matters wage, bill, and revenue. You did say in your speech that it is possible to achieve this 35% in our generation. Is it really? How do we get to the journey towards 35% by 2028?
Thank you. Over the last 2.5 days, the participants in this conference have deliberated. And the reason why I said it is possible, it's because of what the participants have agreed. It's not what we have said as SRC we must do. And I just want to share with you very quickly some of the discussions that makes me say it is possible. The first reason that was given is that we need to focus on the denominator. That is the productivity side. And the discussion was, yes, we can talk about managing the current wage bill, but if we improve our productivity, summed up by 2 words, that we must bake a bigger cake. And that means we must then enable the private sector to grow. That is how our economy will grow. It was also summarized by expand more with less. Can we achieve more with the resources that we have? Whether it is financial resources, whether it is human resources. Let us do more with less. We then got presentations from Malaysia, South Africa, and they shared their journey. And we were therefore convinced that not only is it possible, but the impact is really positive to the economies that have embraced productivity. Back home, we were also encouraged that our own institutions have begun the journey. We got presentation from KenGen and the Kenya Bureau of Standards and the Ministry of Health. They have started the journey, and therefore we are convinced that not only have we seen best practice from other countries, but we can do it. Now, secondly, there was discussion around employee numbers, and that as a developing country, we will still need to recruit in healthcare, in education, in security. So if we must continue to recruit, and yet we have a wage bill issue, then we've got to do something around how we are managing the staff establishments that we have today. So these delegates agreed that we must relook at our staff establishments. Number 3, there was a lot of discussions around duplication of functions, duplication of roles, duplication of mandates. But the question that was asked in the end is, what happened to the previous reports? Abdul Kadir report was mentioned several times. What happened? And the question the delegates asked is, will we be back here 2 years down the line to ask the same thing? And it was then agreed that action must be taken now. We do not want to come back and ask the same one. Now, the other issue that was discussed at length is waste of public resources, that there is a lot of waste. If we can just be more accountable and manage the resources we have, we might actually not have a wage bill problem. Are we managing our resources? Lastly, question about culture. We acknowledge that every year, Auditor General, Controller Budget, they release reports, but what happens to these reports? Are we accountable? The presentation shared our statistics on where Kenya is ranking on corruption. We looked at where Kenya is ranking on productivity. We looked at statistics on how citizens rank services in Kenya, whether they are receiving services as expected. And we could actually see that there is a problem. And we concluded here that there has to be a cultural transformation if we've got to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Lim. My next question, thank you, is to you, CS. There's been a lot of talk about activity versus input, output and outcomes. As the custodian of public service measurement in this government, what is your take on Kenya's model of performance contracting and performance management? Are we measuring the right things?
Thank you, Wangui. I look at it from 2 fronts. One, performance management is much more encompassing than performance contracting. Performance contracting is just one of the measures that is supposed to contribute to performance management, and it's much broader than that. So the conversation that we are having within government is how can we be able to broaden the performance management framework so that it focuses more on productivity, that it measures outcomes and results as opposed to events and processes, which is the current. So that is currently undergoing some review and transformation, and we look forward to the beginning of the new fiscal year to be able to have a new regime that is, 1, much broader, and 2, that is really focused on outcomes. And performance contracting and performance management tools are supposed to answer to the needs of a particular administration. So what we're also doing is asking ourselves, how can our current performance management framework be a tool for this administration to achieve the commitments that we made to our people. Ultimately, we have to do that because the issue of productivity is key, and also, as the chair has said, on the issue of generational equity, that do we want to, as a current generation, to leave all the obligations and all these problems to future generations. I'm going to let me tell you that these fiscal issues, because this ultimately fiscal issue, is actually, it is hiding some real good progress that we are making on other fronts. For example, when we make progress on our exchange rates, when we control our inflation, when we have our GDP growing this year expected at 5.6%, and then that is wiped out by all these fiscal issues that come with recurrent expenditure. And finally, we want to broaden this discussion and ask ourselves, is this just an economic issue? No, for me, it's a moral issue, it's an ethical issue. How can we have 1 million people who are the public servants consuming 41% of our revenues and leaving the other 53 million people to consume 59%? In fact, I would question the other 53 million people. Why are they so patient with us? Because there's a moral issue and there's an ethical issue of how can we have just 1 million people living on the back of another 53 million people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, CS. Wow. Let me move over to the county governments before I come to you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Madam Anne Waiguru, the county governments are at an average of 45% wage bill to revenue ratio, according to the financial year 2022-2023. As you serve your last term as governor, what is your parting shot on matters productivity and the wage bill target of 35% in county governments?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think it's very interesting, the conversation about the wage bill and what it is that we can do. And I think as a nation, it has come at the right time. Indeed, the county governments at the moment are at about 42, an average of 42%. That means that there are those with a lot higher, and then there are those who with a lot less, closer to 35. But I would like, before even we discuss in broad terms and maybe make proposals, bring us into perspective as to why the wage bill of the county governments has been growing. And I think this has been discussed in the last 2 days here. Just from statistics alone, if you look at health facilities, we started with 8,466 health facilities in 2013. We are now at 16,655. Doctors were at 874. We are now at 4,398. Nurses were at 6,620. We are at 31,923. Extension officers were 1,725, and we are right now at 8,078. And now we have started the UHC program. We are going to increase and include our CHPs into the wage bill. And therefore, with all that and the payments for NSSF and all, this is very critical that we have this conversation of how do we achieve all this, because the things that I have mentioned are indeed critical. And not to mention that we also inherited mostly on the county's side, bloated public services from the defunct local authorities, and those people being protected under the permanent and pensionable. So even if you were to do your restructuring, you would not be able to move them. So you have to increase for critical services that are devolved, and at the same time be able to maintain the current staff that you have. The other very critical issue is that revenues to counties has not been increasing in the commensurate manner. For all the functions that we have, if you look at where our revenues are pegged, they are pegged on audited accounts of maybe 3 years or so behind, as compared to 3 to 2 years behind, as opposed to the current year that has just passed, where the percentage of revenue going to counties will be a little higher. If the percentage of the revenue to counties was higher, and if counties put measures in place to increase their revenue allocation, they would be able to lower the average, the wage bill average per county. But this is one issue that we cannot skirt around. I think we need to have a conversation about functions and resources following those functions. And then, as Chair of SRC has said, maybe we need to look also at our structures and see how they are populated and how do we deal with the issue of rationalizing those structures so that you have critical staff that are required for the critical services that counties are supposed to counties are supposed to implement, the functions that counties are supposed to implement. Now, on the issue of my parting shot, what is it that I would say? I think this country needs to look very deeply, introspectively within. Many times we come to conferences and have conversations about what we need to do, but when we go to implement, we implement for the first 6 months or so, and then the resolutions fall by the wayside. A culture of accountability, as has been said, is critical. And those in the public service who have been given the privilege to serve in the public service have to answer that very critical question that has been asked by Moses Kuria. Are we supposed to be spending our resources on unproductive activities as opposed to resources for development? And what is this amount of money that we should cap and say, whether we are a county government or at the national government, what is this figure? And that figure has been said. We have a target right now of 35, but is that the ideal? And finally, inculcating a culture of productivity. I will say in this panel, Your Excellency, if we checked the productivity of the staff, both at national and county level, and especially the middle to lower cadre, you will find that the productivity is very low, because you will find one job that can be done by one person is probably being carried out by 3-4 people. But this is a very sensitive conversation when you're talking about a country where everybody is aspiring to join this public service. Maybe we need to culturalize our people and change the perspective of our people so that we are not all looking to join the public service, and as Chair mentioned, maybe start focusing more on the private sector and informal sectors. And finally, once we set up the structures, once we have them running, maintaining those structures and holding those in leadership accountable, and for us, mentoring, coaching, and passing the skills to younger people so that they understand where we came from when we came to this decision, so that we're not rolling back the gains that we have had. Thank you.
Very well put, Madam Agoro. Thank you so much for that comment, which flowed very well with discussions we have had, Your Excellency, with the former Head of Public Service, Budhaura, and Oginde on leadership, sir. Your Excellency, which brings me to your question. We were challenged as leadership because most of the people here are leaders in your government. And we were challenged that we talk the walk more than we walk the talk. And so my question to you, sir, is when we are surrounded, and reports have come through of wastage of public resources, wastage in public institutions, impunity, and largesse. Give us your thought, Your Excellency. How can we set the tone on accountability, but also consequence management in public service?
Thank you very much, Wangoi. And first, let me congratulate the teams that have brought together this conference. I remember we met at the request of the SRC to put together this conference so that we can reflect on the 2 summits that we had before and how much progress has been made. As has been said here, there has been progress. Came down from 51% wage bill to revenue to 46 now, and we aspire to deal with this challenge in the next 3 years to bring it to 35. And the success of any country, the success of any plan or initiative will stand or fall on leadership. I don't think any one of us need to be persuaded as to whether it is the right thing to do. The questions answered. Is it the correct thing to get our wage bill to 35% as a percentage of revenue? Yes, it's the right thing. Is it doable? Yes, it's doable. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. Right? So it is up to us as leaders to decide whether we want to do this or we want to play to the gallery, we want to talk the walk, as you've said, or we want to walk, or we want to walk the talk. That's the decision we must make. And it boils down to the fact that decisions to be made are not easy. They're not comfortable. They're not popular. And it is the reason why I insist that those of us who are leaders, who have the privilege to be leaders, must understand our calling. We have been elected, all of us seated here, and occupying leadership position, appointed, nominated, employed as leaders. And we have been given responsibility to do the right thing, to make the right decisions, even if they are not popular. And you know, the challenge we've had as a country is that we all know what is right. We have all documented studies, programs, resolutions. But when it's time for the rubber to meet the road, when it is time to implement, it becomes difficult. We have talked about the Abdikadir report. We have talked about the various resolutions of the wage bill before. But we must get to the point where those of us who are privileged to be leaders must be ready to lead, to serve, to make a difference, and not necessarily to be popular. We have a choice to make. And if you want people to clap for you all the time, if you want to be a popular guy, you have an option. You can be a comedian. It's also a very well-paying job. And it boils down to some of the, let me give you two examples. You have a whole cabinet minister. We are having a conversation about drug abuse, alcoholism. And you have leaders who are saying, no, you shouldn't be closing bars. You are mistreating people. Really? Okay, because what are we chasing? Popularity. Okay. The other day, we have a doctor's challenge. You can hardly pay because we've said, there are real issues we want to deal with. You have leaders who it is in their place, including governors, saying we support the doctor's strike. Really? If you support the doctor's strike, pay the money they are asking for. So we must stop chasing what is popular. We must go after what is right. And so, we have three issues, wage bill. Number one, we must deal with the numbers. The current ratio is that we have so many support staff, And the push from the public is everybody wants a job. Mr. President, give us positions for the military, for the police, for this, for that. We must be deliberate about creating alternative pathways to employment. Public service is not a place for employment. It is for employment. And we are going to be deliberate, we are going to be intentional, and we are going to push hard.
الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ewe Mola muumba mbingu na ardhi, ewe Mola ulioko juu, twakuomba katika siku hii ya leo ujalie mkutano huu uwe wa amani, uwe wa baraka, uwe wa neema. Ujalie maazimio yote amani, baraka na neema katika nchi hii yetu tukufu. Utupe neema nyingi nyingi, utupe amani, utupe baraka. Ewe Mola, waongoze viongozi wetu wote katika tukufu, kwani wewe ndiye mtukufu wa watukufu. Amin.
Let us pray.
We have
Almighty and ever-living God, we pray.
Out of university, they deserve employment opportunities for them. The public service cannot accommodate all of them. That's why we must be bold, we must be courageous to push more young people in Kenya in employment. They will contribute to baking a bigger cake, as was said by the
and keeping since we started this conference. Lord God Almighty, we thank you for the success of the
for us to support our counties, to raise more money so that we can have the ratio of wage bill to revenue in the right place. And number three, we must deal firmly, decisively with corruption. We must. There is a lot with fake certificates. And just a simple audit on fake certificates. Those who have earned money using fake certificates should refund us our public money. Isn't it equivalent to obtaining by false pretense or something? Yeah. We want it to go. I don't mind names. Where it should go. So, I don't know whether I've answered your question, but that is my position. I know we have set a target of 2028.